Hi honey buns, I have just a few loving and supportive words for you all today on the subject of moving through your emotional resistance. Emotional resistance, normally when we talk about emotional resistance, what we really mean is when somebody resists healing, resists recovery, or resists moving through their fear in order to really create the life that they want and create the life that they should feel that they deserve. And a lot of the time, when we're going through emotional resistance and we're really holding on to it, we don't actually know that we're doing it. And even if we see ourselves doing it, we're not really even sure why, because, of course, on the other side of that resistance, there is a whole world of opportunity for us. There is a whole world of better, more positive, more productive feelings for us. But instead, we are hanging on to our fear or hanging on to our inability to move forward. And we're not really sure why that is. We kind of wish that we could let go of our emotional resistance and let go of that resisting behaviour, but it's very, very difficult to do that. So I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit about that really. A lot of people do resist healing and a lot of people resist recovery from the issues that they've gone through. They may know that they need to recover, they may know that they really want to feel healed and to feel like they've gotten over it and they've put it to bed and they've done the work they need to do on it. But emotional resistance often comes when deep down we fear that we're not going to be able to recover, we're not going to be able to heal, we're not strong enough, we are not ready. And that fear really keeps us in place. That fear keeps us holding on to our emotional resistance. Another thing that we often resist is intuition, the gut feeling. The feeling that we need to move on, the feeling that there is something else out there for us, or the feeling that we need to actually right a wrong that was done, the feeling that we have somewhere else we need to be, something else that we have to do, that something is ultimately not working anymore. And often when we encounter emotional resistance with regard to our gut feeling and our intuition, it's because we are afraid of shifting the status quo. We're afraid of the consequences of making that change. And we're also afraid of how it may affect other people in our lives. You know, we're scared of disappointing them or hurting them, or realizing that by us making the change that we need to make, other people are going to have to make changes that perhaps they didn't want to make and weren't expecting. So a lot of the time it is about that outside expectation, and that keeps us holding on to those forms of emotional resistance that we use to actually retreat from making the change or to deny accountability for the change that we need to make. And emotional resistance shows itself in lots of different ways. For some people, it's procrastination or wasting time. For some people, it's hanging on to bad habits and falling back onto those bad sort of poison comforts, as I like to call them, and kind of focusing on those bad habits rather than focusing on what needs to be done. For some people, it's walking away from the frank discussions that need to be had with the people in our lives. If you've ever been having a very frank discussion and really kind of getting somewhere with somebody, trying to reach a consensus with somebody with whom you're in a disagreement or you've had a misunderstanding with, and they walk away, they just get up and walk out of the room, that could very much be seen as a form of emotional resistance when you're just on the verge of reaching that reality barrier and actually pushing through it, which is a very difficult thing to do. You employ a method of emotional resistance, you walk away, you shut down. And that can also be a reason why a lot of people abruptly leave relationships. They just get up and walk out of a relationship. They cease communication with you, they cut contact, they decide that the emotions that they actually said they had before no longer exist out of nowhere. It's like they're a ghost of the person they were to you, and that's very, very painful for people to experience when somebody uses that kind of emotional resistance to get themselves off of the emotional hook that they feel they're on. They are too scared to move through their own reality barrier and into the life that they really may want to have with you as a friend, as a lover, as a colleague, whatever, and they can't do that, so off they go, they just shut down. Other forms of emotional resistance, I think one of them, a very classic one, is the urge towards victimhood, the urge towards the blame game. I always say that I think it's very important to understand and to appreciate the wrong that other people have done to you, the wrongdoings that you've had levelled against you, the difficulties that other people have lain at your door. I think that it's important to actually come to grips with that and have that moment of radical acceptance that those people were less than fair with you. But then the only reason that you want to have that moment of radical acceptance is so that you can let go of victimhood, so that you can let go of playing the blame game. You can't stay there. So, for example, if you had parents that were less than perfect and have given you a lot of emotional baggage to be dragging around behind you in your adulthood, then I think it's very important to have that moment of radical acceptance where you actually break down and you actually realise that you did deserve something more, something better, and you didn't get that. I think it's fine to cry about that and to put time aside to actually appreciate that you have been wounded and that that has been a lot of your difficulty. But then what's so important is that after we've had that moment of radical acceptance, we don't stay in victimhood mode, we don't stay in the blame game. We actually accept ultimate accountability. We let go of what we can't control. We can't control the past, we can't control, when people weren't fair with us or when people treated us poorly. We can't control that. What we can control is accepting that that happened and then taking accountability for whatever comes next. And I think that's another important thing when it comes to victimhood versus accountability, is that if you stay where that person put you, if you stay feeling undervalued or feeling worthless or feeling like you can't change because you're not good enough, then ultimately that person who hurt you in the first place has won. And letting go of anger, I think, is a huge part of letting go of emotional resistance. You know, that incredible saying that everybody's always using, and I'm a huge fan of it, when we say that anger, holding on to anger, is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It's you that's ultimately hurt by your anger. It's not that other person. Anger eats you alive, not them. So I think it's a huge form of emotional resistance to stay absorbed by your anger, when really, if you let it go, then sadness and sorrow will come, which is so scary, which we don't want, which we don't ever feel ready for, really. But if that sadness and sorrow comes, then the process has been completed, and then we can push forward into the reality that we actually want. I think rage is another big one. Rage is a form of emotional resistance because, again, rage is about building that wall. It's about feeling powerful, feeling strong, feeling indestructible, feeling like nothing can touch us. We would far rather, some of us, go into a rage than cry about it or write about it or go to therapy and talk about it with a professional, or admit that we are scared, admit that we are tired, admit that we are insecure or exhausted or fed up or petrified of stepping into our own future. A lot of people would far rather get enveloped in this great big red ball of rage, and that makes them feel powerful, that makes them feel untouchable. And many people who've been through emotional, sexual, physical abuse of any kind often resort to rage. Rage it feels incredible. Rage is actually addictive, I think. Rage has a very addictive component to it, but it is a huge form of emotional resistance, and it needs to be let go of, it needs to be ultimately moved through in order for us to realise that rage actually keeps us where we are. It keeps us behind that wall. It's not a wall that we build to keep other things out. It's just a wall that we've built that ultimately keeps us in, and beyond it, when we move through it, is a future that is so much broader and a perspective that is so much more balanced. What I would suggest is, if you realise that you are practicing some form of emotional resistance and you're not really sure why, or likewise, if you just know that there are things in your life that need to be changed, that could be changed, that you feel maybe you'd like to change but you're not sure where to start, you could be encountering emotional resistance and not really realising that you are. I think a lot of the time our choices have a huge part to play in emotional resistance, and a lot of the time our choices, even those choices, those mundane choices that we have to make every day, actually give us vital clues as to where aspects of our emotional resistance really are in our lives. So what I did about a year ago now was I decided to dedicate 1 week of my life to very, very closely observing even the most mundane and prosaic of choices that I had to make. And what I was doing here was I was looking to actually dissect the choices that I make every day, which, let's face it, choices shape a huge part of your life, a lot of the time without you even realising it. I was looking for clues as to the sources of my emotional resistance, or I was looking to catch myself in the act of emotional resistance. It's kind of like when you put cameras all around your house to catch yourself sleepwalking. You know you're doing it, but you don't know you're doing it, but you'd like to identify and recognise when you are doing it and what it looks like. So I decided to put a massive amount of emphasis and mental focus onto my choices, the choices that I make every day, from what I eat to what time I leave the house to anything, what I'm going to do for the weekend, anything like that. And one thing that I realised was a lot of the time my mood is a choice, which I kind of wasn't expecting to have brought to my attention. But I do feel like it's a choice a lot of the time, whether you're in a good mood or a bad mood, and I think that perspective and gratitude have a lot to do with that. And although I felt before I did this exercise that I was very much in touch with that premise, that you could kind of change your mood by employing perspective and by employing gratitude and by looking at your life as it really is instead of blowing those horrible shitty bits out of all proportion, Until I actually did this exercise by like placing a massive emphasis on my choices and actually dissecting them and exploring them, I didn't realize how little I actually used those techniques in my own life. You know, I thought I was all about perspective, and I thought I was all about using that as the driving force behind the reactions and responses I have to my own life and to what happens to me and to what I do. But until I actually held a microscope up to my choices, I didn't realise how much I was actually lacking in proper perspective. And I didn't realise how perspective as a choice can change my mood. So ultimately, my mood is a choice. You know, the way I feel, the emotions I'm experiencing at any one time are a lot more my choice than I think that they really are. And what I would suggest is when you have a look at your choices and when you really start exploring them, when you really start holding a microscope up to them, look for those little seeds of emotional resistance. For example, if you always make that same choice every single day, what is the seed of emotional resistance that stops you from taking the other avenue? Or if you're choosing to stay put every day in a situation that is pissing you off or that doesn't serve you anymore or that doesn't kind of align itself with your core being, where are the little seeds in even the most mundane of choices that you make that have emotional resistance inside of them? Because I bet you can find some emotional resistance, and a lot of the time it just goes unnoticed for so long. It just seems like something that has made your life into what it is, something that's out of your control. And a lot of people talk about placing focus and emphasis on what is in your control and forgetting about what's outside of your control. And that's something that I've really, really picked up on lately in my own life, the fact that I need to let go of unnecessary worry about the stuff that I cannot control. Where I need to put my focus and where I need to place my energy is in the things that I genuinely have some form of control over. I need to exert that control, and then I need to sit back and see what happens. Worrying about immovable objects or impossible situations or anything like that is not worth it, you know, because it's outside of my control. And the more I worry about stuff that's outside of my control, the more powerless I feel, the more disempowered I am, the more weakness I actually feel can be attributed to me. So I think it's very important to take control of those things that are within your remit, and then you will start to realise that emotional resistance kind of breaks down, especially when we give ourselves small, manageable goals. I think a huge part of emotional resistance is the fear that the thing that we are resisting is too mammoth to do, it's too big to accomplish, it's too all-consuming to ever be possible. For example, when we know that we need to heal from something terrible that's happened, when we know that we need to forgive or we know that we need to apologise, whatever it is, we know that we need to let something go. Often emotional resistance comes as the result of thinking that that thing that we need to get to, that place in the future where there has been healing or there has been forgiveness or a consensus has been reached, is impossible. The distance between you and that place is absolutely thousands of miles. It just feels so impossible. So when we break down everything into small, manageable chunks, and we actually give ourselves regular credit for those things that we do to achieve this goal, then I think things seem a lot less petrifying. And that often starts with just taking a little note to yourself of what's in your control and what's ultimately beyond your control, and decide to focus on what's within your control, and then instantly you feel more empowered. And when you make these choices and you make the same habitual choices over and over again and nothing really changes, or you kind of feel that you do want to take a different route with a certain choice that you make, but you don't know why you keep going on with the cycle, like a carousel that you can't kind of get off, there's pretty much always a limiting belief at the base of that choice, at the foundation of that choice that you keep making in the same way for God knows what reason. There is a limiting belief. And the whole point of moving through emotional resistance is to move through fear. You know, 99.9% of the emotional resistance that you exhibit, whether it's through wasting time and procrastinating, whether it's through rage, whether it's through anger or impatience at others or hiding away from others, whatever it is, however you express your emotional resistance to actually getting to the other side and living the life that you want, or feeling the contentment that you want, feeling the healing that you want, most of that emotional resistance is just fear. It's just fear that you're not going to be able to get what you want, so why start? You know, it's just fear that what you want that's on the other side of your emotional resistance maybe won't be that great, or it won't really change anything, or you can't really get there, or, you know, people around you might not appreciate that that's the journey that you want to be on, so why start? So instead you start employing these techniques of emotional resistance, these bad habits that keep you from actually owning up to what you want, taking accountability for what you want, that kind of thing, owning your truth, stating your truth, saying it out loud, and watching the incredible consequences of doing that unfold. Instead, you just kind of lie back on your emotional resistance. And that's a horrible place to realise that you are. So look for those limiting beliefs in the choices that you have to make on a pretty regular basis, or those choices that come along where you kind of know deep down that you want to go that way, but something keeps you going that way. And the thing that keeps you going that way is normally a limiting belief. You'll hear so many people say that a belief starts with a thought and that you can change your thoughts. You can consciously change your thoughts. You have control of a lot more of your consciousness than you think you do. And we always think about belief as though it's this mystical kind of immovable thing that we can't kind of touch, and that's kind of comes from a sacred place. But in fact, a lot of our beliefs are bullshit. They just keep us stranded, they keep us stuck, they keep us pinned to the ground. And if we can appreciate that they just come from thoughts, limiting thoughts that we've never really dissected or explored or questioned or really got to the bottom of, then we realise that so much more of this stuff that is scary to us or that is depressing for us is in our control. It is in our control. All you need is that starting point, that realization that it has come from a limiting belief, and that you can really go somewhere with that. You can really do something with that. And then you start trying to conquer your belief by choosing differently. And that is a terrifying thing to do. Conquering your fear, conquering that limiting belief by choosing differently is scary. And that's why a lot of people talk about the importance of emotional detachment and the importance of just quietly observing yourself doing something. Don't have too many expectations around that thing that you've decided to do differently. Stand back and kind of observe in almost a scientific way. So if this choice comes along and you fear the consequences of choosing what you really want to choose or choosing differently just to see what the hell happens, then let go of any expectation that you have from doing something differently. Detach yourself from that expectation. Don't invest too much into it. Just make the choice differently and then see what happens. As an experiment to enrich you, to help you to explore life on different terms, on a different level, more profoundly. I think it's important that we realise that a lot of the time when we want to make a choice, or we want to go down a different road, or we want to kind of see what happens if we jump off the deep end in some way, we don't, because we have too much emotional attachment to the outcome. A lot of people don't go for that dream job, or they don't leave their relationship and take on that single life that they really want, or they don't start out on their journey of spiritual exploration because they have attached so much emotional weight to that end point. And they think, what if the end point isn't what I want it to be? What if it's not really what I want? What if I'm not good enough at it? What if I realise that the competition is too fierce, There's so much emotional weight and emotional energy invested into that end point that we often forget to realise that the end point is going to change all the time dependent upon what we do, think and feel in the present. That is what I genuinely believe. I believe we are writing the future as we live it in the present. So to invest so much emotional weight into that endpoint is just going to feed your emotional resistance. And however you express your emotional resistance, through any of the things that I've said, or through your own little habits that you've formed to deny your healing or deny the future you want or avoid making that choice that could change the trajectory of your life, you just have to remember, that if you release your attachment or your expectation from the end point, you'll realise that the end point doesn't matter so much as the journey that you're on. And it's always about the journey that you're on. It's always about one step at a time, one day at a time, one observation at a time. So if you can just release or decrease your expectation of your future results by 10% starting now, I guarantee you that your emotional resistance will wane. Because I think a lot of emotional resistance is based around that fear of ultimate failure or that fear of ultimate disappointment. And you know what? That ultimate place, that ultimate time, it's not there yet, The only thing that is there with you right now is the seed of desire to change something, or the seed of desire to take a new path, the seed of desire to start that new part of the journey and observe it and see where it takes you. So try to relinquish that grip on the future, because I know I've had to do that a few times in my life, and it has really helped me to move through emotional resistance. Much love, people. I hope you're having a lovely day.